think about EU-Turkey relations have frequently referred to Spain as the happy story. And when we look at how Turkey fared in 2002, 2003, 2004, we were hopeful that Turkey could in fact be the next Spain. In the course of 30 months in these 3 years, Turkey amended its constitution 8 times. It abolished the death penalty at a time when the most hated man in the country was already sentenced to death. It amended draconian laws restricting freedom of expression and freedom of association. It recognized the decisions of European Court of Human Rights as basis for retrials. And those of you who think about strategic litigation would appreciate what's an opening that allows activists in the medium term. Husbands as the head of the families clause was abolished. Lesser sentences for crimes committed in the name of honor, also known as passion crimes in other parts of the world, were eliminated. State of emergency in southeastern Turkey, where most of the Kurds live, was abolished after 25 years, and did not come back even after the beginning of the Iraq War, or even after PKK chose to kill 250 law enforcement officers. Broadcasting and education in Kurdish and other non-Turkish languages was legalized. Turkey brought its military budgets under effective civilian review, and also it brought its National Security Council and its secretariats under effective civil management. That was something that I didn't think would happen in my lifetime. I literally had to wake up next morning to make sure that the sun would still rise from the east. For those of you who are not familiar with Turkey, National Security Council's Secretary General, before these reforms, had to be a 4-star general. And he had a job description. He had a secret budget, a secret staff, and a job description that basically covered everything under the sun. So you could build a parallel state legally only by being endowed with that law, which no longer is in the books. As a result of the military budget coming under civil review, we have now had 4 consecutive years of education budgets outpacing the military budgets, first in my lifetime. These things were perceived as a great testimony to Europe's soft power. They were hailed as the silent revolution, so much so that EU's Enlargement Commissioner Günther Verheugen, when he asked the human rights NGOs in the fall of 2004 whether negotiations should start with Turkey or whether this should be postponed, the most ardent supporters of negotiations starting were Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International. The moral of the story throughout this period was for EU to keep the membership perspective credible and for Turkey to get its act together. The peak of this reform momentum was October 2004, when the meticulous European Commission declared that Turkey was in sufficient compliance with the political criteria and recommended that negotiations with Turkey for full membership should start. Now, until that time, Turks were told with religious consistency that fulfill the criteria, negotiations will start without delay. Now, suddenly, we discovered that that was not the rule of the game. All the conservative political leaders in continental Europe, with the exception of Spain and Italy, dropped whatever they were doing and started to meet in closed-door meetings endlessly, trying to find a way not to start the negotiations. Austria and France immediately declared that they would hold popular referendums for Turkey's membership. It was a little unusual, but not without precedent. France had already had a referendum on the application of UK. But what was strange, was that the Grand Assemblée of France would see fit to amend its constitution so surgically that this referendum clause would apply to Turkey, but not to Croatia, which became a member after Turkey, a candidate after Turkey, and was to start the negotiations after Turkey. So the fact that we brought out so much pettiness and the worse than EU spooked the Turks. We suddenly were faced with a less benign face of Europe. The popular joke at the time was that Turkey, Bulgaria, and Romania were candidates at the time. The popular joke was that it had become too complicated, so the European leaders wanted to decide who to admit through a simple procedure. So they said to the foreign ministers of these countries that they would ask one question to each, and then if they got it right, they will get in. So the foreign minister of Bulgaria comes, they said, on which year was the first nuclear bomb dropped? He says, 1945. Quick, Bulgaria becomes a member. Next question, which country was it dropped? This was to the Romanian foreign minister. He says, Japan, and Romania is in as well. And then when the Turkish foreign minister comes, the question was, give us all the names and the addresses of everyone who died in Hiroshima and Nagasaki in alphabetical order. And so this was the mood, with some exaggeration, in Turkey at the time. Now, through lots of trepidation, the heads of state in Europe in December 2004 decided to start negotiations with Turkey. This was the most widely covered EU summit in the Middle East. There were more than 200 journalists from Arabic-speaking media. This had become, the way EU chose to treat Turkey had become the essential prism through which Europe's potential would be judged, at least in the Muslim world. But even after the decision, December 2004 decision to start full membership negotiations with Turkey, nothing could be assumed. Cyprus then became the perfect storm to make sure that Turkey wouldn't start the negotiations. Lord David Haney, who handled Cyprus for a long time for UK, describes thinking about Cyprus as watching paint dry. So it's a very painful and slow process, and I will not bore you with it, but essentially it's a conflict that dates back to 60s. After a very long time, there was a referendum in 2004 on a UN proposal. Turkish Cypriots said yes, Greek Cypriots said no, but Greek Cypriots still made it into the EU. Some would argue through deceit, and now use their seat at the table to judge Turkey's application, which Turks found profoundly immoral. And at the time of the referendum in April 2004, there was some sympathy for the Turkish side, but by the time we come to mid-2005, there is a very convenient amnesia. Nobody remembers those days anymore, and they say, well, you know, Cyprus is in, you want to become a member, so you need to play by their rules. It was also unfortunate that critical people like Prodi as the president of the European Commission, Verheugen as the enlargement commissioner were gone. So were Joschka Fischer and Schröder in Germany, who had been critical allies of this process. Essentially, I guess what I'm trying to say is that this is an unequal relationship. We want to get in, they don't necessarily want us. And for those of us who want to use the EU accession leverage as leverage for reform in Turkey, you know, there is some basis for reconsideration. These unequal relationships work only if the stronger party is perceived as benign by the weak party, and that is no longer the case. Why is the EU so negatively disposed against Turkey? The popular answer is that Turkey is too big, too poor, and too Muslim. Now, too big, sure, there are 70-something million people in Turkey, and it may become 80-something by the time it will become a member, making it one of the largest member states. Too poor, yes, it's poor. It's about 30% of the EU average, but that's certainly, and that's where Bulgaria and Romania are right now, and that didn't stop them becoming a member. Now, too Muslim is tricky. Europe is negotiating its own relationship with its Muslims, and even in open-minded UK, when the Londoners are told that there are, you know, 30-something plots being actively contemplated